104.7 The Cave, Mike the Intern, Jay Stevens in the studio, Dark Side of the Stream, episode 132. This week, for full disclosure, actually, I kind of wanted to tell this story because it's hilarious. Last week, we talked about, it was called Lessons in Murder. It's a documentary on Netflix, I believe.
Or Hulu,
about
a nurse killing people.
Yeah. We get through the episode. And I got to give it to Jay because this was brilliant. We get done and he looks at me and goes, bro, I just realized we watched completely different stories. I had no idea what you were talking about. So, props to Jay.
No, but check this out.
Dude,
it was a documentary about a nurse that kills people. That's the same documentary I watched. It was just two different nurses killing people.
We did a whole episode of this thing talking about a nurse that killed someone. I thought Jay had watched it.
Because I did.
We were talking about the same nurse, which I was like,
right.
I gotta give it
That's
to Jay,
the crazier part.
The fact that he was able to keep it going, fake it till you make it. Jay made it, baby.
Story of my life.
Also, towards the end of the episode, we decided to talk about the next documentary, and he called this place Star Studios. So I'm at home that day, and I'm like, Star Studios.
Well, this is how I ended up watching The Wrong Nurse.
I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? Star Studios. Never heard of that before.
Smart.
And then I'm like, wait a minute. He's talking about Butch Vig. He's talking about Smart Studios in Madison, Wisconsin.
Nirvana, they recorded Smashing Pumpkins, all these iconic
L7, Garbage. Yeah. The documentary is called The Smart Studios. So if you were trying to find it all week and you were like, what the hell are these guys talking about?
Yeah.
Sorry.
They found it.
The Smart Studios.
I got to turn. There's a weird light. It looks like an apparition is by my head. I'm trying to.
You got that soft lighting thing going on. I don't know what that is.
Something behind me that I'm not liking.
So. All right, so today,
that's the problem with all this.
Like
the light behind me.
We can't even get this down. So while Jay figures out what angle looks the best on his camera,
we have ample studio space.
We're going to talk about the Smart Studios in Madison, Wisconsin, which is a free documentary you can watch on YouTube.
Yeah, I stumbled across it, and it was an amazing story. I didn't know, and it's the ultimate do-it-yourself story.
It's a really cool story about how these two guys got together and started this little studio in Madison, Wisconsin that would become famous. You can still see it. It has been through different hands. It's currently owned and called, I think Clutch Sound is what it's called now, but it's still there in Madison if you ever go. Madison's a great town.
Little beat up brick building.
Yeah. Old school brick building.
Town.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah, it's not in the greatest part of town. And again, it's just sitting there. Like you're just driving along and there's this like corner building and you're like, oh my God, they recorded Nevermind in there. Wow. Yes, they did. But it really starts with how, especially at this time in music history in the mid to late 80s, everyone was either focused on the East or West Coast, mainly the West Coast and Northwest. But it was, again, Midwest got no love at all. I mean, we kind of got some stuff. There are certain bands that became famous from the Midwest. Daredevils or Speedwagon, stuff like that. But really, we weren't known for anything other than kind of, I guess, hillbilly music, which could be further from the truth. And Smart Studios really helped put the Midwest on the map as far as some of the talented guys we had and what we could do. And it wasn't just what these guys did in Smart Studios. Steve Albini with Drag City in Chicago did a lot of really cool stuff as well. But we're more focusing on Smart Studios and what they brought to music in this documentary and episode of Dark Side of the Stream, which will continue next on 104.7 The Cave. .7 The Cave is Springfield's pure classic rock. I'm Mike the Intern. This is Jay Stevens. It's Dark Side of the Stream, episode 132, the Smart Studio story that you can watch on YouTube. Jay,
free on YouTube.
Yeah, free on YouTube.
Best documentaries to find.
Now, it was interesting to me that Jay Stevens, of all people, would come to me and say, hey, man, you're going to watch a documentary about a bunch of grunge bands that got famous because of the studio.
Yeah, guys that built their own studio, didn't know how to record. They just figured it out.
This was the end of your era.
Oh, I know. It's very ironic that I embraced it, but I like a good story, and I especially like a good do-it-yourself success story. These guys had no clue what they were doing.
No.
Buying cheap used mics for $10 or whatever they could find and just slapping it together and ended up literally recording one of the biggest albums
of all time, in that studio. And who would have thought? Now, again, this was about a partnership between two guys, Butch Vig and Steve Marker, who were musicians in their own right. And I guess they started hanging out at a couple local bars and would get super drunk and go back to Steve's house, who I guess at the time had like a multi-track
Yeah, a
or
little
reel-to-reel,
recorder and just
and they just started playing. And I can't emphasize this part enough because I did the same thing when I was about 15. I worked all summer to save money at an awful, 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 awful sandwich shop that does no longer exist here in
sandwich
town.
shop.
Yeah, it was a sandwich shop here in town. They no longer exist. But
You
it
were a
was
sandwich artist.
was the worst place to work. The guy, oh my God, it was horrible.
Is he listening right now?
I don't know if he's even still alive, to be honest with you, but it doesn't matter either way. I worked all summer at this job, took every dime I had and bought a Tascam cassette 8-track recorder.
Dude.
And spent that summer, because I quit, took all the money, quit, and then spent that summer, the rest of the summer, recording stuff and learning how to record, learning how to mix,
Do it, man.
dubbing. When I run out of tracks, dub them, bounce them down, and stuff like that to cassettes. And I have them all.
Adding the
still.
extra hiss each
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Having my friends that I knew play come over and make songs with me and just record and getting used to how it worked and really it helped solidify my love of just like the recording arts in addition to being a musician, because it's a whole different thing. And really why I wanted to be a producer was when I started doing that stuff, because I could see the potential of doing something like that. But that's kind of how they started their story with Smart Studios, and then eventually helping kind of shape the Midwest grunge sound with help from some guys from the Northwest, which we'll get to and talk about next. Dark Side of the Stream continues next on 104.7 The Cave. Mike the Intern, Jay Stevens back in the studio. It's episode 132, the Smart Studios story. And again, this talks about Butch Vig and Steve Marker and their studio located in Madison, Wisconsin, which would produce bands such as Killdozer, Smashing Pumpkins, L7, Tad, and Nirvana. Now, first, before we go any further, I have an admission, and that is I do not own one piece of music from the Smashing Pumpkins. And that is because I've always kind of not been the biggest fan of Billy Corgan.
He's a polarizing figure, is what they say, right?
Yeah, but I you know what? After watching this documentary and then also watching an interview he did with Howard Stern years ago, I'm starting to come over to his side a little bit. I think he was always just a little pissed off that Kurt got all the credit, you know what I mean, for the sound and what was happening. And I don't understand why that is. But at the same time, like that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, especially
he's
when
got a really
good
interview with Joe Rogan as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But after watching this documentary, I'm starting to kind of warm up to him a little bit. And the other thing that I saw was you hear about how you know the story about his dad, Billy Corgan's dad.
Not sure about
so I guess his dad was not the greatest guy, in and out of jail, drugs, all this stuff. And even when Billy was getting big, was steal money from Billy.
Well, that stuff happens.
Which is just, come on, that's your kid, bro. Like what the hell? It's one thing to be a stupid dad, not raise your kid, but then after the fact, come back and steal money from your kid. It's like, geez Louise, man. Yeah, man. So the story goes that I guess they were trying to kind of repair the relationship, didn't talk a whole lot, but then all of a sudden he just didn't hear from him. And then one day he finds out that his dad and I guess the girl he was seeing in Florida had won the lottery and a sizable amount of money. Oh. And so Billy called him and said, "Hey, what's this I'm hearing about you winning the lottery?" And he texted him or messaged him, and then he calls him back and he kind of confronts him on it. And the reason his dad didn't tell him was because he was afraid that Billy would ask him to pay back the thousands of dollars that he stole from him. Dude. I couldn't believe it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give this dude the benefit of the doubt. I have to. I'm not going to buy a Pumpkins record just yet, but I'm not going to just spew hate about him anymore either.
Well, maybe there's hope for Motley Crue yet.
I don't know. I think that ship sailed. But in Billy's sake, I thought his contributions to this documentary were incredible.
Yeah,
and it wasn't just him. I mean, there's a lot of guys involved in this. Of course, Butch Vig would go on to create a band called Garbage with Steve Marker, and they would use Smart Studios in Madison to record those albums, which are huge. So yeah, it's got so much history.
I knew nothing about it, so it was, the great documentaries for me are the ones that have plot twists. This didn't really have plot twists, but man, I learned a lot,
it's really cool because it shows a really cool music scene in Madison, what they were able to do there, and not unlike what like Lou Whitney was able to do here in Springfield with some of the artists that he worked with and some of the bands that came through to record with him and stuff that, I mean, Wilco did stuff with him. And so it's not like each town in the country doesn't have something like this. I think that the towns that do have stuff like this, like with Lou or Smart Studios in Madison, are very lucky because you can say that's a rich history of what we do in the scene and what we can contribute to the world. We'll come back with our, I guess, I don't know how the hell we're going to
how many
reels of tape we're going to give this. Either way, we'll be back. Dark Side of the Stream next on 104.7 The K. Mike the Intern, Jay Stevens back in the studio one more time. Dark Side of the Stream, episode 132, the Smart Studio story. Free on YouTube. Watch it. It was great. I would give it a solid 4 reels.
4 reels of
rating.
tape too. Yeah, it was great. I learned something.
Yeah.
And a real good, feel good, do it yourself success story.
And it just goes to show you kids that if, especially now in the world we live in, if there's a will, there's a way. You can figure it out. It doesn't need, you don't need to cost, it doesn't need to cost thousands and thousands of dollars.
These guys did it on the cheap.
They
I think that was cheap. Part of the sound.
They built it as they went. Yeah, of course. And sometimes, I mean, you look at like Motown, most of those records are recorded in a converted garage, for Christ's sake. So, I mean, again, you do the best with what you have and the talent that you need and to control the equipment that you have can really turn out some really cool sounding stuff. And they definitely did that in Madison, Wisconsin. So check out that documentary if you haven't already.
Mike's booking his appointment for his
God, I wish I had the money.
Tattoo.
Yeah, not just yet, bud, but maybe I will buy Simon Stream
one
finally.
More Billy Corgan documentary.
Maybe. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see. I'm just one step at a time, baby steps. All right, next week's my turn. This is a Netflix series on
Netflix.
It was released this year. It's called Waco, American Apocalypse.
All right.
Can't wait to go down that
nice story about a
cult path one more time.
Cult documentaries are always good.
Hell yeah. Well, it should be a quick one. Watch it. In the meantime, you can watch us every Thursday, 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. on Facebook or YouTube, or listen to it live on 104.7 The Cave during my show.
Stream us on the podcast.
Jay's, or
if you miss it, you can
always listen. Yeah. You got 132 episodes of podcast.
Don't say we never gave you anything.
And I'll tell you right now, I probably remember 5% of what we've done. So you might learn something.
I have a hard time remembering 10 minutes.
Yeah. And we're both in the same boat, brother. I'm Mike the Intern. This is Jay Stevens reminding you we watch movies.
Documentaries.
So you don't have to. It's Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The Cave.